get a continuation now. Yay! Alright, here we go. Let's continue the story from the last time. So, last time we did the Gift of the Martyr when things had turned very bleak and very sad. Now let's see what happens to Auram and company. Auram and his linked comrades, the Crusadia, are up against a new foe, the Orchist, who can be called back from the graveyard even after they are destroyed. One question remains. Who is the mastermind behind these menacing machines? A new World Legacy battle is about to be unleashed. World Legacy Survivor. Ooh, there's a lot of story in this. World Legacy Ruins? Ooh, there's some stuff in here. Alright, but let's begin. What happened after? The secret powers of the planet. A few years had passed since that nightmare of a tragedy. When Auram awoke, he found that the girl and her brother were no longer with him. Was Ib really gone now? For good? The loss of the girl had its grip over Auram's heart like an unbreakable vice. I couldn't protect Ib. If only I were stronger, then her death could have been avoided. The battle had left a chasm in Auram's heart. Now that Ib was gone, Auram had tasted for the first time just how terrifying a battle could be, and how devastating losing someone you treasured could be. He didn't have the heart to go on with his journey. Not for now. However, there was still one thing on his mind that bothered him. It was Ningirsu. Even now, Auram still had no idea where he had gone. No doubt despair had taken him, now that his beloved sister was no more. And when Auram thought about how Ningirsu must be feeling right now, his heart became fraught with an immovable weight. But that was exactly why Auram had to go after his childhood friend, and so the swordsman resumed his journey with Imduk. It was when panic was beginning to settle in Auram's mind. Was it coincidence? Or did the mech knight that dwelled within him lead him to it? He stumbled across a dormant crawler. Typo! It occurred to Auram that this might lead to a clue. He could try and restore it and see if its communication system still worked. Crusadia Maximus. Interesting. Auram succeeded in restoring the crawler and gained access to its communication system along with a number of records. that detailed areas in which the swarms were active, and data on the locations where many crawlers had been destroyed. Perhaps there was still some life left in those areas, and if there was, maybe they would know where Ningirsu had gone. Armed with his new clue, Auram set off to the areas he had gleaned from the records. However, as useful as the information was, it unfortunately didn't make Auram's expedition any easier. There was nary a sign of life to be spotted anywhere, and the journey was looking like it could end in vain. Nature, uncaring and unrelenting, continued to batter the two mercilessly. But at last, a glimmer of hope. At the end of the arduous tunnel, Auram and Imduk had stumbled across the remaining tribes of the planet. That of the fiery recluses, the stalwart beasts, and the sacred lakeside
Hey, look
trees.
at me! Look at me!
You ruin it. You don't use solo mode. I just started it. Although this encounter brought no clues as to Ningirsu's whereabouts, Auram and Imduk were blessed with the legends and knowledge of the tribes. And by linking them together, Auram was able to unlock a great power of the world and witness the tremendous power that slumbered in its death. It made him think of the world chalice powers that were bestowed to him. But this was greater, far greater, hiding unbeknownst to the dwellers of the planet. Was this what Lee had sought? Auram thought. Yes, I am doing the new solo mode. Crusadia Maximus. Protectors that illustrate a warrior who has matured and taken the scars etched in his heart during battles. Perfect for those who always want the best for their dear friends. Let us resume. What were the more secrets dwelled beneath the sea surface? The typos. One of them was the rebirth records, inscribed with the history of the planet, chronicles from generations long forgotten, and the others, bygone memories of the planet's glorious age where humans ruled from the apex. Long, long ago, there was a god who ruled the skies. With dragonkind as its disciples, it perpetuated the cycles of destruction and rebirth to maintain the balance of the realms. However, the scales of destruction grew bigger each time, and one day, the balance of the two was thrown into great disarray. Once this delicate balance toppled, even the sacred skies could not hold back the destruction it wrought. The god decided that it could no longer oversee the skies by itself. With its powers of creation, it brought forth layers and layers of the toughest earth, and sealed the powers of destruction within. With nowhere to go, the powers raged and raged until it boiled and scorched the very earth, morphing it. The torrent of power rushed through the land and merged with the powers of creation, leaking out onto the surface. It became a small manifestation of the cycle of death and rebirth, and gave life to the land. With the last of its strength, the god then turned itself into a key, and entrusted it to the life blooming on the planet before vanishing. In the years following its disappearance, the powers of destruction re-emerged on the surface many times. However, every time it did, the life on the planet would use the key and, with the help of the dragonkind, push it back to whence it came. Over time, the key came to be known as a word, and the great power of destruction as the Great Darkness. Thus, the great legend of the world hero was born. Starlit hero, your sword swathed in light, may you triumph over the great darkness. Did anyone see that? Did you all see that? That is that staff that Ib had is the key.
Hey, look at me! Look at me!
Let us begin. Decades, centuries, maybe millennia passed since the beginning of the work of the Rebirth records. The land was now populated with life known as humanity. They were a civilization who had gained scientific knowledge and technology know-how, and were at the height of their prosperity. Of course, it has to be humanity. Why do we gotta fluff things up? Their glory came at a cost, for it not only tore the planet's gifts away from it, but also the dragons who protected it. Noticing some parallels. The god and the dragons that once were had faded into obscurity as mere tales. And it was during this time that the key was excavated and uncovered. The humans were exhilarated by such a legendary and mystical find. Although its authenticity became gradually acknowledged, some expressed worries and doubts at the discovery. What did it mean for the key to have resurfaced in this time? Was this an omen, warning them of an inevitable battle between the world hero and the Great Darkness, like the legends said? Now that they could see that the key existed in its sword form, did this not also mean that the powers of destruction were indeed sealed deep within the planet's crust? Humanity began to assemble their finest to analyze the key. Within the team that had formed, there was a scientist who has shown her talent in the fields of medicine, astronomy, and archaeology. Her name was Lee. Lee was known all over the world as the foremost authority on computer science. The analysis was able to proceed smoothly thanks to her involvement, and not long after, the team branded itself as an organization called Crusadia, under the jurisdiction of the Confederation of Nations. Once they had analyzed the key further, they began to draft a plan that would help fight the imminent threats to their planet. Excuse me. It would involve warriors of a mechanical nature, and they called it Project Mech Knight. Work was to proceed without a moment's delay. Meanwhile, Lee drew up a hypothesis and sought to validate it in secret. She wanted to get to the root of the appearance of the Great Darkness that world hero legend spoke of. Recorded in the legend were multiple tales of the key being used to drive back the Great Darkness by harnessing the powers of creation and destruction. It was a simple enough story. The Great Darkness would appear, and the world hero would fight it back with the key. However, could the reverse also not be true? That using the key was the very thing that drew the Great Darkness out? There were those who were entrusted with a divine mission, and the conspirators who sought to revive the powers of destruction. The world hero legend was ultimately a story of their power struggle over the key. whoever has the key will control the fate of the world. Or so went Lee's hypothesis anyway. And the more time she spent trying to validate it, the darker her ambitions grew. The divine powers will be mine. And thus, Lee is a jerk. She's such a jerk. Why is she like that? Why did she have to be so mean? We trusted her and she was mean from the start. A few years have now passed since Project Mech Knight began. And finally, Mech Knight of the Morning Star was complete. It had been fitted with a core powered by the key and possessed enough power to fight the most deadly of wars. However, an incident occurred during its test run with none other than Lee as its test pilot. With the key, she had reversed all of the celestial powers coursing through its mechanical body and diverted them into the planet's core, faster than anyone could make a move. Lee had planned all this out before taking her place as test pilot. The power had flowed into the planet's core, split the land, and once again the destruction from within overflowed to the surface, scorching every bit of Earth that it touched. The entire world was beginning to split apart in the unprecedented disaster, and the revival of the Great Darkness drew ever nearer. However, its resurrection was not without its obstacles. The Crusadia had created, as assistive units, 7 Mech Knights in total. Oh, sweet Arceus. How we misjudged you guys. The remaining Mech Knights faced off against Mech Knight of the Morning Star and destroyed it, sealing away the Great Darkness back within the Earth once more. But the Great Darkness was, at the end of the day, a divine force, one that the mortals failed to seal away completely. Inspired by the key, the team decided to put their powers into physical vessels of their own and left them on the surface as legacies. 1, 2, 3, 4. We've seen 4 of them so far, but what about the other 3? Now that the lands were ruined, it was getting harder and harder to live in such conditions. It seemed that life on this planet would be gradually snuffed out, including humanity. The reason why the Master of the Key, the world hero, didn't appear in our time of need is because we humans drained the planet of its powers. Thought the Crusadia. They began to mobilize to put an end to humanity's so-called glory, as it was the largest obstacle to the revival of the barren lands and the planet's chances at survival. They left the 7 Mech Knights they had built in their ruined world after they were programmed with instructions to help rekindle the planet. The Mech Knights were also installed with data of the Crusadia members they had established a brain link with. If the lands could be healed once more, and the planet could take back the power it once had, then perhaps they could avoid imminent disaster. The Crusadia left all their hopes to a faraway future they might not even reach, or may not even realize. However, there was one thing they failed to realize. The mastermind behind this incident was Lee, and she had already been taken by the burning lands. When she was found, she was already dead. But only in flesh. Her soul had been released from its physical vessel, and she had transferred into World Legacy World Chalice her will and knowledge. Now the pieces are coming together. Now we continue our story. The tremendous power that dwelled within the planet was the very thing that Lee was after, thought Auram. Suddenly, he was struck by a sense of terror. He could feel a great force of malice that threatened the planet, but from where he could not tell. Perhaps someone, somewhere, was beckoning to the darkness, trying to bring it forth. He had to stop them before another terrible disaster happened. And in that moment in Auram's mind, the figure of Ningirsu appeared. The figure of his childhood friend, tormented with sadness from the loss of Ib, seeking darkness in his despair at the world. Although slight, he could feel Ningirsu's presence within the malice. It couldn't be. Auram reined his uneasy heart in. He would need help to stop this malice. He asked the elders of each tribe to lend him their strength. And they answered his pleas. With a great number of warriors and the tribes united in a formidable alliance, they named themselves after the warriors of old that their writings spoke of, and thus the second coming of the Crusadia was born. The Crusadia were taken to a hidden spot by the tribe of the Sacred Trees, and activated World Legacy World Crown. Auram and his companions had now obtained power that could help them combat the malice that threatened their world. The Crusadia began their advance toward the giant tower at the center of all the malice. The orchestrated Babel, towering into the sky in its metallic magnificence, surrounded it were the Orcus, mechanical weapons, waiting on standby in silent formations. At the tower's base was Ningirsu, and activating World Legacy World 1 was the only thing on his mind. Now that Auram could see his childhood friend, the swordsman could only think about how much sadder he looked. Auram prayed that he was only overthinking the situation, but he knew that their reality was not a kind one. Ningirsu was here because he wanted the power of darkness, and he was at the center of the malice Auram had felt. That was the truth that awaited him at the end of his long search. But no matter how much time had passed, no matter how things had changed, the one thing that remained the same was that Ningirsu was still his friend. Auram thought about what he could do now that he was here. He had to stop Ningirsu from starting a disaster that could mean the end of their world. The only one who can stop this villainy is me, Auram thought, gathering all of his courage. He signaled for his companions to mobilize, and now, a new battle was about to begin. That is a lot of scenario. That is a lot of storytelling. See, that's why I like the World Legacy. It's such a beautiful story. You could write you could make a movie trilogy about this. We've already got the storyline. You can make it. Move over, Game of Thrones. Oh my goodness. This thing has everything. This story has everything in it. Apparently there's another scenario. let's see what happened. What happened? Ningirsu's sorrow. So this is from Ningirsu's point of view. So we were on Auram's side, now we're on Ningirsu. When Ningirsu saw what had happened, a bolt of guilt pierced through his grief. Even in his desperation, he never imagined this would happen. His eyes could hardly believe what they were seeing. How did all of this happen so fast? He prayed that he was dreaming, and that he was going to wake soon. All he wanted was to see his dear sister again. As the scene of another nightmare unfurled around him, he became embroiled in a storm of emotions. Yeah. Seeing your own sister die like that, like literally, and not being able to do anything. Last episode, he took on 5 nightmares. 5! Without the power of the World Chalice. That was a heck of a fight, if you remember. I uploaded a video, it was a heck of a fight. I was desperately trying to win that. Imagine what it must have been like for him. I need to save Ib. Even as his mind was numbed with stupor, Ningirsu's body began to move without command. Pow! Ha ha! In what looked like an impulsive choice, he struck his childhood friend unconscious, taking both the other man's sword and Ib. What good was this world if Ib were not in it? He would do anything, be it good or evil, if it meant that he could see her smile again. That single thought of getting his sister back was all Ningirsu needed to force his weary limbs forward. He had the Mech Knight cores from when the 6 nightmares were defeated. And now he also had the sword he took from Auram. Using the facilities that were still present in the Mech Knight headquarters, he analyzed the artifacts with feverish desperation. This world possessed a mystical power, similar to that of the World Legacies, and if anything had a clue regarding its specifics, it would be the Mech Knights. They might even have a way to bring it back. Although he was unable to glean a way to resurrect Ib, he learned a great deal about a number of facilities from the ancient civilization. Ningirsu left the Mech Knight headquarters and set off to each one of them with the lifeless body of his sister in tow. Many of the facilities he visited had already ceased to work, and the ones that barely did provided little to no useful information. However, Ningirsu never gave up. There must be a way he could save Ib somehow. With that unwavering belief in his heart, he resumed his grueling journey. And finally, at long last, he discovered an ancient facility that was still in working condition. Oh dear, and this is where he goes down the dark route. After countless weary roads walked, Ningirsu had gone through more information than any average man would in his life. He had thoroughly inspected the Mech Knight cores and several ancient facilities. With what he had gathered, including files on the key and technologies thought to be long lost, he had finally unlocked the secrets hidden within the planet. And the truths of the world that had been shrouded in mystery, Ningirsu trembled with joy. He could revive his sister now. With his newfound certainty, Ningirsu set about creating a vessel that could house Ib's soul using the ancient technologies. However, This task was to be the most difficult yet. Trial after trial resulted in countless failures and their byproducts. As the days ticked by, he had amassed enough vessels to create his own army. But at last, his efforts paid off. He had finally created a mechanical doll that would work. By synchronizing the doll with the body of his dead sister, he also succeeded in reinitializing the functions of one of the twin swords vital to his plan. So much time had been poured into this endeavor, but at least there was something to show for it. A strange sense of elation began to bubble within Ningirsu. His sister had given her life for this world. Now it was time for him to create a new world for her. Now that Ningirsu had the mechanical doll's powers, the second step of the plan to build orchestrated Babel could finally begin. And from that, the stage is set. But for now, let's see the conclusion to the secret powers of the plan. The Crusadia headed toward where Ningirsu was. However, before they could reach him, they had to get past the countless Orcus weaponry. The Orcus were merciless as they were numerous, and the Crusadia suffered greatly as they tried to fight their way through. In the heat of battle, Auram began to feel that within orchestrated Babel, there dwelled a power similar to that of his key. The mechanical vessels, which were used whatever little of the key's powers they had inherited and activated orchestrated Babel. From the depths of the tower, a great light was released, and the tower itself seemed to almost fall away with it, as the beam stretched into the sky above. No! The activation must be stopped! Auram thought as he dashed toward the machinery. However, before he could move any further, Ningirsu appeared before him. It was the first time they had seen each other since that tragedy long ago. Their eyes met within the chaos of the battle. Auram opened his mouth to speak. Why, he asked, would you want anything to do with the great darkness? Why put our planet under threat like this? Why did you create this spiraling tower and this army of mechanical weapons? Ningirsu had only one simple answer for him. For Ib. It was the only reason he needed. For his sister, he was willing to activate Babel to strike the World Legacy World Wand down from the skies and break the Earth's surface. So he could awaken the slumbering World Legacy World Arc and use its influence over life and death to revive Ib's soul. Then, after the great darkness had been freed from within the earth, he was going to use its power to resurrect Ib as a celestial being. Now that he had heard the truth from Ningirsu, Auram readied his sword and knew that he had to stop this at all cost. Ningirsu didn't budge and instead swung his lance in return. No one was going to stand in his way, not even Auram. The swordsman knew that Ningirsu loved Ib more than anyone in the world. But that did not make it right for him to put their entire planet in danger like this. Auram knew that Ib would not want this, even if it meant that she could live once more. However, for Ningirsu, there was nothing he wanted more than to see his sister open her eyes again. And if it meant that he had to turn against the entire world, then so be it. Both men had already made their minds on what they wanted to achieve. Neither wanted to budge, and so they clashed. But neither could they gain a decisive advantage. The orchestrated fable activated. And at last, the world wand had been toppled. When it fell to the earth, it gored the land below, and the resulting shockwave reverberated across the entire planet. And just like that, we get left with a cliffhanger. But the gate is clear. Hey, we get to quit the thingy. And guess what? We've already bloody purchased all the cards here. We've already got all the cards. But thank you anyway.